I'm excited to hear from Jessica Payne tonight, because I don't know her work, and it's one of the pleasures of my job to find out about new work. So I'm looking forward to it. Jessica is a novelist and short story author. She won the Wasatch Iron Pen competition 2 years running. Her short stories, Contracting Roots and A Brief Affair with Lonnie Anderson. I had that in my dreams once, but WKRP in Cincinnati. Jessica's most recent work in paranormal suspense serial novella entitled The Solstice, Solstice, is now available on Amazon and Kindle Unlimited. She holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Utah and an MBA from Westminster College. Jessica owes most of her accomplishments to coffee, as to many of us, without which nothing would ever get done. Or on rare occasions, she's able to relinquish her coffee mug. Jessica cultivates a new generation of writers by facilitating a writing workshop for 6th graders at the local elementary school. The coffee right after my heart. Please welcome Jessica Payne.
Well, thank you so much. It is such an honor to be here and to read with the brilliant Jen Gibbons. I'll be reading 2 stories as well tonight. The first one is Contracting Roots, which I won the Iron Pen competition for a couple years ago. If you guys haven't heard of that competition, it's really awesome. They give you a writing prompt one night, and you have 24 hours to write a story in response to that prompt. The prompt that I received for this story was this picture of a sago lily. So just to kind of give you some background on that. Okay, so Contracting Roots. We arrived at the cabin 2 evenings ago in the kind of light that blurs the edges and meanings of things. As we pulled into the dirt drive, I wondered if objects of shape and structure stay constant, or if in the softness of twilight they blur into the atmosphere and melt completely into night. Before we leave, I may venture out to test my theory, to see if in the darkness I can still find something solid to wrap my hands around. In the daylight, the intensity of this place presses down on me. It finds weight in each of my senses, and I try to repress it with sunglasses and sunscreen, with headphones, aerosol deodorant, and mint gum. But the sand finds its way into my molars, and there's no escaping the smell of my second day in the sun with no shower. The sky shade of blue is suffocating. It clogs my nostrils like strips of blue gas station paper towels put over my face layer after layer, my head lost in a papier-mâché of troposphere and ozone. The plateaus and rocks are full of mass and gravity. I want to be somewhere weightless. I want to be sucked into space, shattered into a million molecules and drift gracefully around the galaxy. I want to be mistaken for stardust through the lens of someone's telescope. My parents are divorcing, and even though I'm 19, at college, and fully grown, they seem to have settled on some kind of joint custody. This is my dad's weekend, and his idea of a fun way to spend time together is to take me to this cabin in the most remote area of southern Utah so we can not speak. I read at the kitchen table in a small space I've carved out of my dad's camera equipment, a mess that sprawls from the kitchen to the bedroom. Zoom lenses, flashes, tripods, extra batteries, and light meters. I wonder how my mother put up with this for so many years. I guess she just accepted it, just like she accepted cleaning toilets as part of housework, or how she accepted getting crow's feet, or how she accepted that my dad was in love with someone else. It's been nothing but stuttered and awkward dialogue since we arrived. Jammed f-stops and unpredictable shutter speeds make us blurry and double exposed. Without my mom here to interpret, it seems like everything we say is lost in translation. We keep conversations to a minimum, sticking to short and simple sentences, sometimes with large hand gestures to articulate meaning, almost to the point of pantomime. My eyes dry from reading. I decide to abandon my book and take a walk. I go up and down the same stretch of road, afraid to venture too far. I'm not quite sure what lives out here. Snakes, coyotes, perhaps. The trails are made of a fine, pale sand that muffles my footsteps, so I talk out loud, partly to scare off anything that might cross my path, and partly to chisel into the stillness. I didn't know there could be degrees of silence, but it's like the world is a gas that has reached absolute zero. Every molecule that makes up this mesa has halted, with the quiet so deep there's no buffer for my thoughts, and they are left to knock their jagged edges against the inside of my head. About a half a mile out, there's an old abandoned piece of farm equipment. 2 metal wheels with an axle in the middle rusted to a dark mahogany, surrounded by a tangle of barbed wire. It looks like an old sprinkler, and I wonder who dared to live out here? Who tried to make something grow besides cactus and sagebrush in this forsaken sand? The only thing left of the effort sits rusting in a pile of weeds twisted with morning glory. I sit on a rock and I stare at it. The last 2 days I've watched it, wondering if I'll be able to witness the moment when it finally relents and crumbles into the dirt. Just as the light begins to fade, I see my father's figure on the horizon, just a small speck in the distance. It would be imperceptible to most, but I've sat here long enough to make out subtleties. At one point, he disappears behind a rolling hill, only to lumber into view again, closer this time. Some daughters might walk to meet him, but I stay rooted to my spot until he joins me by the rusted sprinkler. He nods hello, struggling and wheezing with his tripod and case full of camera equipment. I know I should help him, but I won't. If my dad stood straight, he would be almost hulking, but his slouch loses him a good 3 inches. His face is covered with a silver mist from 2 days off his razor. Another day or two and he'll have a decent start on a beard. I've always been fascinated with his face. I remember sitting in his lap as a little girl, running the palm of my hand over his cheek. In the morning, his freshly shaven face was as smooth and cold as an ice-covered pond. But at night, the resistance of the day made stiff bristles against my hand that scratched and tickled at the same time. After a few moments' silence, he smiles at me. It's his usual half-smile, weighted down by years of exhaustion and disappointment. His eyes carry the burden of his grin, eyes the glue of washed-out jeans. And it's his eyes that propel me out of my resentment and order my hand to take his heavy camera case. His burden a little lighter, we make our way back to the cabin. "How was your day?" he asks. "Fine," I say. My voice cracks from disuse and I cough to make it right. "I had some good shots today. The lighting sent me back," he says, even though I don't ask. I pull open the front door. "You hungry?" he asks, setting his tripod in the corner. I put the camera case down on the table and shrug. "I'm going to start a fire out back, get some cans of soup." I nod and rummage through a box of food and pick a bean with bacon for my dad and a loaded baked potato for myself. I look at the perfectly functional stove and roll my eyes. This cabin has most of the creature comforts of home, but my dad likes to do the things the old-fashioned way up here. Tucking the can opener under my arm, I sigh and head out to the fire pit. In the short time he's been at it, my dad managed to coax a small fire into being. He wheezes it further into life with several puffy-cheeked breaths and some well-placed dry leaves, then sits back in his camping chair and loosens the laces on his boots. I work on piercing vent holes in the soup cans. "I've got something for you," he says, and points to the camping chair next to his. I teeter to the side as I take a seat. The leg is broken and repaired clumsily with duct tape. My dad opens the side of his vest and pulls out a soft white bloom from his inside pocket. Afraid it might be a little worse for wear, he says. "I took pictures of it before I picked it, but I wanted you to see it." My dad has always loved taking pictures of flowers. Every shape, size, color, every day's exotics. Our walls at home were filled with a bouquet of wooden frames, some of them buds on the cusp of bloom, and even a few as their blossoms sagged, hanging on their stems like broken necks. But I've never seen this one before. I twirl the stem between my forefinger and thumb and examine it at different angles. Large petals, creamy, turning to pale purple as it nears the center. The edges are already browning a little. "What is it?" I ask. "A sago lily." He takes the soup and puts them carefully into the fire so as not to disturb the ash. I erase the wonder from my face and summon a frown. "It's illegal to pick these, you know, state flower and all." You going to turn me in? He chuckles and stokes the fire. Thanks, I mutter. I don't want to thank my dad for anything, but it's not lost on me that this is the first flower he's given me, not printed on glossy photo paper. The rest of the night, we leave the art of conversation to the crickets and other nocturnal themes. We eat our soup in silence and watch the fire leap out and lick the darkness. The next morning, my dad is up, breakfasted, and out to capture nature on film before I even finish a REM cycle. I roll out of bed feeling hot and dry from a restless night's sleep and wander to the kitchen. He left the coffee pot on for me. I stare at the little red light on the coffee maker and debate if I will pour myself a cup. It's his fault I'm out here in the middle of nowhere, bored off my rocker while he takes pictures. It's his fault my mother lives in an apartment now, and when I visit, we eat lean cuisines in our laps in front of the TV. It's his fault I'm missing my old life around a dinner table with pork chops or tuna casserole. It's his fault I have nowhere to call home. But he leaves things on. Coffee pots, porch lights, my favorite radio station in the car, and it makes it impossible for me to hang him. I pick a mug from the cupboard and fill it with coffee. I eat breakfast with the sago lily, who now lives in a red plastic solo cup full of water. I've decided we're close enough now that we're on a first name basis. Lily sits in her tilted in her cup while I eat a mini box of Fruit Loops. We stare at each other as I chew, and when I'm done, she watches me wash my bowl and leave it to dry in a dish towel. I lean against the sink and sigh, trying to think of how I will fill my endless hours today. This is my Aunt Linda's cabin. She's a botanist, so there are books about local vegetation on the bookshelves, mingling with Scrabble, Trivial Pursuit, and Yahtzee. My fingers find a text on flowers, and I flip to the index. The sago lily is on page 359, and there's a picture, and I compare Lily to the book. The lily in the book is all white. Too white, too glossy, too perfect. It looks like something from the Garden of Wonderland. I expect at any moment it will open its mouth and sing, and kick me out of the garden on suspect of being a weed. My lily is flawed. One of her leaves has been chewed by an insect, a little more brown taking over her white petals than yesterday. The book also gives some interesting tidbits. Lily mostly grows in semi-desert climates and sagelands. She is cold hardy, and you could eat the bulb, but it looks a lot like death camas, which is poisonous, so people keep their distance. As she grows, she pushes herself further into the sandy soil, contracting her roots to dig in deeper. She's finicky and hard to cultivate. I can relate to Lily. Abandoning the book, I take Lily with me to the covered porch. I slump in an old glider, and on the end table there's a CD player. Rifling through a stack of CDs, it looks like my only options are oldies, so I put in Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons and push play. Also on the end table are old family pictures. My cousins at various ages in front of the cabin, my Aunt Linda, and Uncle Carl in hiking boots and safari hats, my uncle with a trout that stretches almost the length of his arm, all caught and released by my father's 35mm. There's an old picture of my parents and me. I remember this picture. We'd come before my sophomore year of high school in August, when everything was brown from the heat. I'd gotten my own camera that year, and spent that day following my father around the mesas, taking pictures of flowers and birds and patterns in the cliffs. I'd gotten bored after a few hours, but my dad wouldn't take me back to the cabin. He just left me to pout on a rock the rest of the afternoon in the sweltering sun. In my teenage angst, I decided to never take another picture with that camera again, and to give my father the silent treatment the rest of the trip. And without me in the equation, there wasn't much for anyone to say. I'd thrown things out of equilibrium, destroying the transitive law that guided our family dynamics. Without my dad, we'll call him A, bearing some relationship to me, C, then my mother, B, could no longer relate to A. Even so, just before he left, my dad set the timer on his camera, and we conjured smiles long enough for the red timer to flash down the seconds, our smiles fading after the picture was taken. I pluck the picture from the end table, like I would a ragweed, and shove it under the cushion of the glider. Pressing repeat on the CD player, Lily and I listened to Big Girls Don't Cry 6 times before I paused it to get a refill on my coffee. I don't realize until I'm halfway to the kitchen and feel tears on my face that big girls actually do cry. I'm sure if Lily had hands, she would give me a tissue. She would put her leafy arm around me, pat my back soothingly, or rub it in slow, comforting circles. She would understand when I tell her that some homes sometimes crumble away from you like arid dirt, leaving your roots dangling and exposed. At lunchtime, Lily and I go back to the fire pit and stare at the blackened logs that cooked last night's dinner. I eat a bologna sandwich while Lily sits in the cup holder of my camping chair. I tell her how I never saw my parents hold hands, just an obligatory tight-lipped kiss goodbye each morning when my dad went off to work. It was as though their marriage suffered from a chronic illness. Like years ago, it was exposed to contaminated water that seeped in through the soil and cracks in the foundation. The disease took years to manifest, and once they realized it was terminal, there was no denial or anger or bargaining, no arguments or shouting or throwing things, just a quiet resignation in the dividing up of assets. My childhood home was sold, the money put into mutual funds and Roth IRAs for tax shelter. I'm glad something's getting sheltered. Lily and I wait for my dad on a rock in the driveway. I watch for his hat to come over the hill, which it does just as my watch hits 6:30. When he's close enough, I stand up, holding Lily in her plastic cup, ready to greet my father, not with a hello or a cold glass of iced tea, but with, how could you? My anger hangs in midair, dangling and exposed. My dad stops short, just a few feet away, his brow furrowed. I don't wait for an answer, not from his lips and not from his eyes. I yank Lily from her cup and throw her at him. My face hot with angry tears, I run with the empty cup in my hand, the water splashing into the dirt. What surprises me more than my own histrionics is that my father doesn't run or call after me. He just lets me go. When I reach the old farm sprinkler, I stop and try to catch my breath. The last thread of sunlight sinks below the cliffs, and I sit on my rock and watch as a fingerprinted moon rises over the plateaus. My watch ticks off one infinitesimal degree of lost light at a time, and I watch the shape of my hands fade into the darkness. I feel him coming, and I look over my shoulder to confirm it. The yellow cylinder from his flashlight sways back and forth with his pace. I wonder if he knows what he's going to say to me, and if he stayed away all this time to let me cool off, or to think of how to patch things up. His footsteps are muffled in the sand, his presence announced only by his shortness of breath. "You dropped this," he says, holding Lily out in the light of his flashlight. I want to take her, but I turn away. "You going to sit out here all night? Coyotes, you know. Not a lot of meat on your bones, but they'll make do." I don't laugh. I know he wants me to. "I know you're mad. I guess I deserve it," he says. Lily's empty solo cup bends in my grip. "I'm sorry." My dad's voice, a barely audible breath on the breeze. I feel him place the sago lily in my hands. She's shriveled from being out of water, her stem limp in my fingers. I look up at my father and put her back in the empty cup. My tears flow freely again, thinking of how our equation and its variables have changed, and we are left to find a new equilibrium. We need a new guiding principle, and I think of the law of conservation of energy that states that it can neither be created nor destroyed, but it can change form. And something pulsates inside of me, expanding and contracting over and over, like lungs with breath or heart with blood, like the contracting roots of a sago lily that burrow deeper into the ground. I decide it's time to test my theory, to see if things of mass and weight still exist without light. I reach out, groping, trying to find anything solid to wrap my hands around. And in the dark, I find my father's hand. So I just have one more short flash piece. Never been read before, so kind of its debut. This one is entitled, "Where Ashley is the New Beige." I went with the Caroline comforter set, yellow with blue flowers. This Caroline looks cheerful. She greets her day with a smile and a cup of strong tea. A Caroline that would take notes at a meeting, wear a red lipstick, and end her sentences with a lilt in her voice. Or the sweet Caroline in that Neil Diamond song. I want to be this good time gal, this confident Caroline with a sunny quilt pattern named after her. Ordering her quilt from Laura Ashley might be the closest I'll ever get. For years, I have been sleeping under a beige comforter. My husband and I could never decide on color, so I bought the only non-color boring enough to represent our life together. I tried everything to give it life. A red throw, a decorative pillow in various shapes and hues, but nothing could resuscitate it, and it pressed down on me like dead weight. 50 Shades of Beige, that was our love story. No sexual escapades, no whips, chains, or bondage, just sleepless nights tossing under an off-white duvet, feeling more isolated than if I were sleeping alone. I flopped face down on the bed. This mattress is softer than the one I shared with my husband. I must have tried 30 different beds at the store. Certa Perfect Sleepers, Beauty Rest, Sealy's, Tempur-Pedics. The impatient salesman suggested memory foam, but memories are the last thing I want in a mattress. I bought a pillow top. I'll never get through this, I whisper into my Egyptian cotton sheets. I'm not sure if they answer back. I think they speak only in hieroglyphics. I spoon through the decorative throws and the pillows with shams until I unbury my real pillow, the one meant for sleeping and drooling on. My old down pillow that I've had since college, the one that smells like me. I can feel the quills trying to poke their way through the 400 thread count pillowcase. Feathers I hope can hold a tsunami of tears and still take flight. Thank you so much.